work for Lewis Creek Association. We are a nonprofit watershed protection organization that began in 1990. Our mission is to protect, maintain, and restore ecological health while promoting social values that support sustainable community development in the Middle Lake Champlain region of Vermont. We started on Lewis Creek, as our name implies, but we've since branched out to include the La Platte River, which drains out in Shelburne into Lake Champlain, the direct-to-lake drainages of Thorpe and Kimball Brooks, and a little further south, we do branch out a little bit into the Little Otter watershed as well. So Bristol is sort of on the edge of our range, if you will, but we love to interact with all of our towns, and I'm excited to be here tonight to talk to you guys. We have Matt Gorton here as well. Matt will be talking towards the end of our presentation tonight. He's a Bristol native who is currently working on his master's degree at UVM, and he ran our Lewis Creek Invasive Survey and Boat Launch Steward program last year. So he'll be talking a little bit about our aquatic invasives work in Bristol and beyond. Okay, so my name's Kate Kelly. I'm the program manager for LCA and for our South Chittenden River Watch volunteer water quality monitoring program. And I want to talk to you a little bit tonight about how we can take better charge of our lake's future by using a watershed approach. We've been learning about our water quality over the years, and we want to share this information with you and invite you to network with us as we use this sort of all-in watershed approach. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to share my presentation now, and hopefully all goes smoothly. And actually, I realized that I failed to do something, so I'm going to unshare my presentation, and then I'm going to reshare my presentation to make sure we get all the proper sound coming through in the little video clip I'm going to play. Okay, so now when I do this, I cannot see any of you. So if you have any questions or concerns or issues, please either type them into the chat to Matt, who can help you, Matt Gorton, because I can't see you if you raise your hand, so I'm sorry. Okay, so let's move forward here. So Lake Champlain is an important and valued resource to Vermonters. The 2017 Clean Water Report by the Vermont State Treasurer says that $300 million is raised in tax revenues and fee revenues from tourism each year. This number, tourism, is only a portion, about 1/5, of what we bring in revenue because of our clean lake and other natural resources. A polluted Lake Champlain is costly to all taxpayers. The 20-year total clean water compliance costs are projected to be $2.3 billion, or $115 million per year, according to that Vermont State Treasurer's Clean Water Report in 2017. We must work at every level, from property owners to municipalities to the state, to restore the health and functioning of our watershed. We're going to need everyone to pitch in, because what we do on all of our properties and in our towns throughout the watershed will determine our rate of success in restoring the health and beauty of Lake Champlain. Your help is essential. Okay, so how does phosphorus get into the lake? Well, we have phosphorus-rich clay soils in the Lake Champlain Basin. During rain events, both fertilizer, manure, and these tiny clay soil particles that bind to soil phosphorus are carried the farthest and the fastest, leading to excessive phosphorus in our streams and lake waters. The smallest amount of bare soils can lead to erosion that transports this soil to Lake Champlain. Phosphorus then provides the bulk of food for algae. This can result in excess algae growth, including potentially toxic blue-green algae or cyanobacteria, and fish kills. Champlain Valley streams drain a very large landmass to Lake Champlain. The watershed that feeds Lake Champlain is 18 times as large as the lake itself. Rainfall and snowmelt wash over this large landmass and carry sediments, nutrients, and pollutants into our rivers and streams and on down to Lake Champlain. Bristol is near the headwaters or top of essentially 3 different watersheds: Lewis Creek with Pond Brook, Little Otter Creek, and the New Haven River, and it's also essentially a gateway to the lake. Vermont contributes 631 metric tons of phosphorus to the lake per year. That's what you're looking at on the left side of your screen. Agriculture and development contribute the most to that phosphorus loading. In order to meet our phosphorus reduction targets, which is on the right side of your screen, in order to improve lake water quality, we need to reduce phosphorus by about 30%, with the largest and most cost-effective reductions coming from agriculture. Straightening rivers and armoring banks was done mistakenly to save farm fields and backyards. It caused water to flow faster, which led to more downstream flooding, more carrying of sediments, and more damage to property because of the force of floodwaters. So here you're looking at, on the right side of your screen, a stretch of straightened river. This is here in Heinsberg, where I live. So this is the La Platte River. And you can see how perfectly straight this channel is. On the left side of your screen, you're seeing this natural sinuosity or meanders in the river. So in the Lewis Creek watershed, about 113 miles have been assessed. 19% of those were assessed as straightened. And in addition, 10% were affected by berms or roads close to the stream. In the Little Otter Creek watershed, 36 miles were assessed and 23% of those were straightened, with 8% affected by berms or roads. So flooding is much more common now because of climate change. The vast majority of phosphorus reaches the lake during these major storm events. So in our very large Lake Champlain drainage area, our clay soils, past management practices, more development, and heavier storms are accelerating the rate of phosphorus and other pollution reaching the lake. Because our river systems are so connected to lake health, solutions to lake pollution must occur throughout our river systems, including their upslope watersheds, like in Bristol. It takes an all-in watershed approach. This approach is complemented by Vermont's enhanced and science-based river management practices. Okay, so we will now watch a brief video that shows 3 river management principles. Each new strategy is shown first, followed by the historic stream alteration that it replaces, and then talks about why this replacement is important. Okay, so I'll now do a quick review of those 3 river management principles that you just saw in the video. So first, we must allow natural floodplains to work by slowing flows and attenuating sediments. When this happens, those phosphorus-rich clay soils can settle out onto the floodplain lands, delivering nutrients to plants that enrich habitat instead of carrying them down to the lake. Fully functioning river corridors and floodplains allow more stream flow water to stay local, soak into the ground, and recharge the local groundwater supply. Stream water and sediment flows slow down when streams meander naturally. By increasing meanders and the stream length over the slope of its watershed, these flows are less erosive and both habitat and water quality increase naturally. Removing gravel from the stream bed causes downcutting, adds to stream speed and force, and therefore erosion and sediment loading to the lake. The overall message of this video is that what we do in one place in the watershed may have an unintended effect on the stream, so we have to consider the functioning of the whole watershed or catchment area to be effective. This is taking a watershed approach. Okay, so we'll talk for just a minute about what's being done here in Vermont. The state of Vermont has put new regulations into place, including the 3-acre permit, the Municipal Roads General Permit, and Required Agricultural Practices, or RAPs. Towns and property owners must meet these requirements, often at great expense. LCA and land trusts work to promote voluntary measures, often going above and beyond regulations to take into account climate change. For example, the Vermont Land Trust conserved the river corridor on the Clifford and Briggs farms in the Starksboro Valley. This project will allow the stream to meander and access its natural floodplain, as you saw in the video. Monitoring water quality helps to detect hotspots while understanding trends. LCA's Water Quality Monitoring Program, South Chittenden River Watch, along with our sister group, Addison County River Watch Collaborative, informs our project locations and designs, as well as the work of state agencies. Our current data results confirm that much of the Pond Brook and Little Otter region streams have excessive phosphorus concentrations. Towns and others can better utilize this information, for example, by including the information about high phosphorus in your town plan, to allow the DRB authority to make conditions for water quality, such as respecting a wider buffer. Okay, so here I show you just a brief map. This is what we call our scorecard map for the La Platte River drainage, and as well as the direct drainages to the lake. And I show this not to confuse you by showing you a different watershed entirely, but just to tell you that this type of map, which shows essentially water quality conditions graphically with these little boxes within each box showing phosphorus, E. coli, chloride, and solids. We hope to make this type of map available for the Lewis Creek watershed soon, but for now, I'll have to show you several maps and graphs from various sources for the Lewis Creek and Little Otter watersheds. Okay, so first, just to again mention that Bristol here, sort of on the lower portion of your screen and half grayed out, falls in essentially 3 different watersheds. So Lewis Creek, Bristol Pond here drains north into Pond Brook, which flows into Lewis Creek, which comes down here to Lake Champlain. Also the New Haven watershed, the Little Otter watershed. So several of your tributaries here come into the Little Otter Creek and flow out to the lake. And then also the New Haven River, as I'm sure you're all aware, which is sort of grayed out here on the maps. So I apologize as I go through this. I don't have pretty maps for the New Haven River. I hope to at some point in the future, but the state person at DEC who made these kindly for me did not have a chance to make the New Haven River map yet. So just to give you a brief overview, the state calls rivers by essentially 3 different names. So we have impaired rivers, which means they're essentially in trouble and they can be impaired for a variety of reasons. We also have stressed rivers, like this section here of the Little Otter Creek. And those are like not quite impaired, but also not doing 100% great. And then we also have altered water bodies, which in this case are lakes that are altered because of like Eurasian water milfoil, for example, or some type of invasives. So Lewis Creek is impaired for contact recreation, meaning you shouldn't be going swimming in it, from Starksboro near 116 down to Spear Street Covered Bridge in Charlotte near Mount Philo. And that's due to high E. coli and agricultural runoff. Pond Brook, this tributary that comes out of Bristol Pond, is one of the largest phosphorus loading tributaries in the Lewis Creek watershed. It is also impaired for contact recreation in this area due to E. coli. Little Otter Creek, as you can see, is impaired for aesthetic reasons, aquatic life support, and contact recreation due to agricultural runoff and high E. coli. And it's also impaired for aquatic life support in this section up here as a result of agricultural runoff. The New Haven River, as I mentioned, is not on this map, but it is stressed for contact recreation and aquatic habitat support. And that's due to E. coli and stream bank erosion. And it's stressed from where it crosses Route 116 in Bristol, just east of the Lord's Prayer Rock, down to the confluence with Otter Creek. Okay, so now a little bit of data. I don't want to overwhelm you too much with this map and all these crazy colors and dots, but the dots you're looking at are the state's aquatic life assessment. So they go out and they monitor in streams and they look at both bugs or invertebrates and fish in the streams. And most of your stations in Bristol, although they're not really showing on this map, are in quite good condition. You do have, maybe one section where they're sort of like good as opposed to very good condition, but you don't have any of these like really poor, like for example down here that fall in the fair to poor range. Okay, so water quality data now. We use these types of data to determine where fixes need to be made in your town, and they help guide our work. So I pulled these data and these graphs from Addison County River Watch Collaborative's webpage, and they have these kind of fun interactive graphs that you can choose, which watershed you want to look at, which parameters. So here I'm showing on the upper left total phosphorus, and on the bottom right E. coli, which is a type of bacteria. And in general, in Lewis Creek, phosphorus levels increase downstream, showing that erosion is really the primary source of phosphorus in the creek. On Pond Brook, as I mentioned earlier, which is one of our big loading tributaries of phosphorus, we did a study looking at phosphorus along Pond Brook to show that really it's not coming out of Bristol Pond, but rather it's coming off high flows from particular reaches of that brook. So these are some water quality data, the same graphs you looked at earlier. So phosphorus on the left and E. coli on the right. This is for the Little Otter Creek drainage. And you can see here that, there's quite a few stations that exceed these allowances. The red line is essentially the state's threshold for phosphorus in this case, or for E. coli. So you can see that many of these stations are up above that threshold on the Little Otter. And on the New Haven, you guys actually have quite good water quality. You can see the threshold, and most of these spots are quite well below the threshold for phosphorus, and also below in most cases, for E. coli. And then I just wanted to, talk real quickly about some of the cool mapping tools that are out there that I'm sure some of you are aware of already. In BioFinder or through the ANR Atlas, you can look at these areas of high priority forest blocks, which are in dark purple, and the highest priority surface water and riparian areas, which are in blue on this map. And you can see you guys do have, a nice large chunk of dark purple highest priority forest blocks, as well as, quite a bit of this blue high priority surface water areas. And of course, there are also some unique other communities and species in Bristol. Wetlands here in dark blue, You have natural communities in red and brown, so these are sort of unique natural communities. Vernal pools, dark blue dots, and rare and uncommon species, which are in purple and pink up here. So you have lots of things in Bristol that are really worth protecting. And then one other tool I wanted to point out, it's a newly released tool from the Nature Conservancy called their Water Quality Blueprint. And it helps identify the best places to invest in nature to help clean up Lake Champlain. This includes things like keeping wetlands intact, restoring floodplains, protecting upland forests, and maintaining vegetated buffers along waterways. They have a composite water quality impact and conservation value score. So it takes into account some of these other things that I was just showing you, including rare species and other conserved lands nearby, forested blocks, those types of things. So this score goes from 1 to 10. 1 on this map is green and 10 is red. So 10 being like the best area to protect to improve water quality and help clean up Lake Champlain. And I just wanted to point out, so here's Bristol. You have this area in red around Bristol Pond that's, ranks as quite high on their map, as well as the New Haven River here. So just as a note, it's kind of fun to play around with their new tool. Okay, so Lewis Creek Associations, ahead of the storm program, showcases slow it, spread it, and sink it principles to its demonstration sites and in all our land management practices. These are things that we can do, around our own homes or in our towns to help improve water quality in our streams and our lake. So I'm just going to show you a few examples of those types of practices from these demonstration sites. This site is East Thompson's Point Road in Charlotte, and it's a roadside swale that was designed with these rock check dams going across that slow the water down before it drains into Thorpe Brook, which is down here at the sort of upper right of your screen, but bottom of the ditch if you were looking at it. And this really helps improve water quality because the water isn't rushing down this swale, carrying all sorts of sediment and whatnot with it. Instead, it can slow down and pool in these areas and drop its sediment here before it reaches the brook. At this site, which is the Heinsberg Town Garage, buildings and a berm next to Beecher Brook here were removed. If you had driven by this site, say 10 years ago, there was quite a mound of soil here with some buildings for the town garage on top of it. And last year we were able to move all these things out. The new building was replaced back here. And we were able to recreate a floodplain for Beecher Brook. We also put some rocks and logs into the stream, into the brook to help raise its level and allow it to spread out onto the new floodplain, dropping its sediment held in the water before it got washed down the brook to the La Platte River and into Lake Champlain. At Shelburne Community School, this project transformed the area in the middle of the school bus circle from a grassy lawn with storm grates where the water went directly from the parking lot into McCabe's Brook into a rain garden, which allows the water to sink into the ground, getting cleaned up by the plants in the rain garden before it gets sent on to the brook and the lake. Okay, so let's say you're on a town commission board and you're interested in what you can do in your town to help improve water quality. Okay, one thing we can do is to enhance language for protection of river corridors, buffers, floodplains, and wetlands in town plans and land use regulations. Just in a quick review, I noticed that Bristol has not adopted the new river corridor protections, which would allow the town to receive an additional 5% in emergency relief and assistance fund post-disaster. This essentially provides the state funding to match the federal public assistance after federally declared disasters. And it ranges from 7.5% to 17.5%, depending on your town's protections. So by adopting these the enhanced river corridor protections, Bristol could gain this additional 5% in payment. We can also design for climate change, so we can go above and beyond our existing state regulations. For example, we could lower the trigger for the review of the amount of impervious surface on developments in our town. Heinsberg now requires enhanced stormwater management practices for development of 10,000 square feet of impervious surface. This is as opposed to the state's 1 acre trigger for review. Without these enhanced land management practices, new weather patterns will damage the lake sooner. So we can go above and beyond the municipal roads general permit. This roadside swale in Charlotte, again at East Thompson's Point Road, was designed to carry water from a 100-year storm in the swale. So you can see that this swale is quite wide, broad, and grass-lined so that it can carry more water in it and therefore not erode or cause problems to the road or to the farmer's field. We can apply those same permit principles, the design principles of the municipal roads general permit, to both driveways and private roads. So you could condition private road designs in your town for new development. As I mentioned, that municipal roads general permit applies only to your town public roads. But of course, we have many private roads and driveways in our towns. Bristol is actually doing quite well compared to like the rest of our watershed towns. You have some of the fewest private roads of our 7 towns. Shelburne has the highest with 43% of their roads that are private. So, applying these principles to driveways and private roads and then enhancing them to prepare for larger storms can really help improve our water quality. Things, examples of this would include crowning the road to prevent gully erosion, grass lining ditches on the sides of the road, including those water bars on steeper roads, and installing check dams or rock lining on steep road ditches to slow the flow of the water. And of course, you can be informed by the documented water quality conditions of your streams. There are annual reports available on our website. And of course, Addison County River Watch Collaborative also has reports available on their site. Starting a conservation fund, if you don't have one already, to protect natural areas of high public value. This photo you're looking at was an area protected by the Charlotte Conservation Fund along Lewis Creek, with additional funding from the Charlotte Land Trust and Lewis Creek Association. We can mitigate impacts from historic building and farming too close to stream corridors and wetland areas, and from historic stream alterations that now increase flows, allowing that excessive phosphorus loading to the lake. All right, so how about if you're just a landowner and you're interested in what you can do on your own piece of property? Well, we can manage our landscaping to prevent soil and stormwater from leaving your property. You can apply those ahead of the storm principles of the 3 S's, slow, spread, and sink, to your property's backyards, driveways, and private roads. Manage to prevent sediment and pollution from reaching your waterways. We can keep soil on our own properties. You can redirect your downspouts so that the water sheets over the lawn instead of making a gully or going directly into a water collections drains. You can use a rain barrel to collect rainfall so you can use it for watering, and you can fix gullies when they have just begun. Like we mentioned, grading and using water bars or broad-based dips for your driveway will help you keep that soil on your property and don't let it leave there. This is a rain garden that is installed at a private home in Charlotte. It allows water from the roadside ditch that used to flood across their driveway to be collected in this area and to soak into the soil instead of flooding their property. Minimizing your lawn and cutting grass no shorter than 3 inches slows the flow of water because those taller grass and plants have deeper root systems and catch more water. Trees and shrubs along streams and swales help minimize pollutants and sediments that reach the stream. And just a few other tips of things you can do that will help our water quality. Your towns provide funding support each year to LCA, and we have a devoted group of volunteers who help collect water quality samples, help with projects, and advise on our board. You could consider joining us. In particular, we're looking for a board member from Bristol. So here's my little spiel. You can reach out if you'd like to hear more about what this entails. Investing now in preventive measures and fixing past mistakes will cost us less in the end. So please reach out to me with any questions or to get involved. You can sign up for our e-newsletter on our website, or if you checked the box on your form that you want to be included, I will add you automatically. Funding for this presentation was provided by the Lake Champlain Basin Program, NUEPIC, and Vermont DEC's Tactical Basin Planning funding. What we do on our properties and in our towns will determine our success in restoring both the health and beauty of Lake Champlain and our community health. So with that, I'm going to wrap up my portion of the presentation, and I think I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Matt directly to talk to us a little bit about aquatic invasive species, which obviously are related to water quality as well. And then after that, we can take questions. Does that work for you, Matt? Okay, great.
Works for me.
All right, so I'm out of that. So Matt, you should be good to start sharing, hopefully.
Can you all see that?
Yep, we're good. Looks awesome. Great.
So hello, everybody. As Kate said, my name is Matt Gorton, and this past summer in 2020, I was contracted by Lewis Creek Association to survey Lewis Creek, Bristol Pond, and Moncton Pond for aquatic invasive species, and to establish a boat launch steward program at Bristol Pond. Firstly, I'm going to discuss the boat launch steward program that was at Bristol Pond. So the boat launch steward, he was typically at the pond Friday through Monday between 7 in the morning until noon. And while performing his duties, the boat launch steward would record the watercraft type, the group size, state of registration, if the visitor was launching or retrieving their watercraft, the time the inspection occurred, if the boater had any previous contact with a boat launch steward, if the visitor accepted or refused the inspection, and if the visitor took any aquatic invasive species spread prevention steps, what species they found on the watercraft, and then lastly, what water body they visited in the prior 2 weeks to the inspection and where they would go next. So our boat launch steward, who you can see on our left right here, Jeff, he interacted with 570 watercrafts throughout the summer, and out of those 570 watercrafts, only 3 individuals refused to have their watercraft inspected for aquatic invasive species. And the most interactions with visitors occurred in July, with July 4th being the busiest weekend of the season. And approximately 17.5% of the visitor interactions throughout the summer did occur on the 4th. And the majority of the boaters at Bristol Pond were kayakers, followed by motorboats. And the vast majority of boaters were from Vermont, but we did have some people coming from as far away as the Gulf of Mexico and Texas. And interestingly, about 62% of visitors took aquatic invasive species spread prevention measures before visiting Bristol Pond, whereas around 38% of visitors did not take any aquatic invasive species spread prevention measures, which is great that 62% of people are doing what they're supposed to do, but it still means that there's work to do. We still need to educate over a third of the boaters visiting the pond in regards to aquatic invasive species. Now, most watercraft didn't have any aquatic invasive species on them, but we did interact with 63 boats that had plants on them. And typically it was Eurasian water milfoil that we found, and it was typically on their boat or their trailers. However, sometimes it was in their fishing equipment or their paddles, and sometimes even on their personal flotation devices. Now, the boat launch steward found most of the aquatic plants on motorboats, which was probably due to there being more pieces of equipment protruding into the water compared to the other watercraft types. So for instance, that means that the plants probably were found on the prop or the motor. Now, the Bristol Pond Boat Launch Steward Program's first year was extremely successful in intercepting aquatic invasive species and educating the public on the issues surrounding aquatic invasive species. And the vast majority of the visitors to Bristol Pond seemed genuinely excited to have us there. And pretty much every day that the boat launch steward was out there, we would have people come just to see him in action. It was great to see such positive community support. Yeah, and furthermore, visual inspections and hand removal of aquatic vegetation has been shown to be extremely effective at preventing aquatic invasive species from spreading to other bodies of water. And we deemed the boat launch steward program as being successful due to the steward preventing at least 63 potential infestations to Bristol Pond and other bodies of water throughout the state. And in the future, Lewis Creek Association's boat launch steward program could potentially prevent both directly and indirectly aquatic invasive species spreading to those other pristine bodies of water that are within the watershed. And Lewis Creek Association also intends to continue its stewardship program at Bristol Pond this year coming up, and they're also expanding it to Moncton Pond. So during our aquatic invasive species surveys at Bristol Pond, we only found 2 aquatic invasive species, Eurasian water milfoil and European frogbit, which can be seen in this picture. And milfoil was found throughout the pond and often outcompeted most plants where it occurred. However, in some places, it didn't completely choke out other vegetation. And frogbit was quite common along the margins of the pond and was interspersed throughout the wetlands at the pond. And in addition to milfoil, we found curly-leaf pondweed and banded mystery snails at Moncton Pond. And lastly, we found 7 invasive species in Lewis Creek. Those were curly-leaf pondweed, Eurasian water milfoil, flowering rush, Japanese knotweed, orange daylily, poison parsnip, and yellow iris. And additionally, there are historic records of water chestnut occurring at the mouth of Lewis Creek. However, we didn't find any of that water chestnut while conducting our surveys. And lastly, we are hiring boat launch stewards. We are looking for people who are passionate about maintaining a healthy ecosystem and who have or want to have a connection with Bristol Pond and or Moncton Pond. So if you're interested or you know somebody else who is interested, please let us know. You can either contact me at my email address or you can contact Kate for more information. And this job posting can also be found on Lewis Creek Association's website. And if you're interested in seeing some of the results of our surveys, feel free to check out our aquatic invasive species map on Lewis Creek website. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Matt. So we're open for questions. We have no major time limit, so feel free to fire away. Feel free to turn on your video and mute yourself. There's not too many people here, so I think just go for it. No questions.
Hello.
Oh, hey, Carolyn.
Hi, I was wondering where that position is going to be posted. I thought maybe I have students might be interested. If I could get a copy or if you could tell me where I could find it, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's on our website right now, and I can send you the link to that page.
It looks like we have a comment from Ethan Swift. Ethan, I'm assuming that comment is in regards to the graph that I showed in the presentation. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. I was just looking at all the plants that you had recorded, some of which are native plants. And I noticed, Eurasian water milfoil seemed to top the list. I know that Bristol Pond is has abundant Eurasian white foil, but I guess, yeah, just the point being that it's good to show which plants are invasive and which are native, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely a great point. Yeah, I think one of the main reasons we didn't at first, which I think we probably should do that in the future for sure, is just because a plant is native to, let's say, Bristol Pond, doesn't mean that it's going to be native to you know, even Moncton Pond, for instance, or Lake Champlain. Lake Champlain is probably going to have them all, but even portions of Lake Champlain, certain plants don't occur. And I think the thought process was we want to encourage people not to travel with plants or water, period, because of what's native here may become an invasive species, let's say up in Beaver Meadows, up on top of, you know, the Bristol Notch. But I appreciate that comment, and I think that's a really good idea. So thank you.
Hey, Matt, just to drill down on that a little bit further, and since I seem to have the talking stick, I know that it's really difficult also to, you know, to check your boat or your equipment, you know, from going from water body to water body, knowing that, you know, water transfers pretty easily if you have a bait bucket or if you have a live well on your boat. You know, there's different ways I know to ensure that you are doing well by spread prevention. But you know, how you know, there are different ways, I guess, of ensuring that we are doing the best we can to minimize that. And I know, like, trying to prevent water transfer is a good way of doing it. But I wonder if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Of course, yeah. So essentially, the mantra is clean, drain, dry, and that goes for the boat as well as the equipment. There's some people say you should allow your boat to dry out in the sun for 7 days. However, that's not always feasible. So what you can do is you can make sure you wipe out all of the water. And one of the most effective things you can do is to power wash your boat with just hot water. 120 degrees is sufficient enough to kill anything that is on there. But one thing that we like to say to people too is whatever's good for the boat is good for the lake. For instance, if you have a clean boat, not only is it going to allow your boat to last a long time, but it's also going to protect the body of water that you're going into next. But also, you know, just making sure if you have bait, if it's approved for one body of water, if you got the bait from that body of water, dispose of it there, don't transfer it somewhere else. If you see any plants, even a speck of plant on your boat, make sure you remove it, because of that could turn into an infestation as well. But there's a lot of great information on Lake Champlain Basin program's website that gives a much more in-depth breakdown of what you can do to prevent invasive species spreads. But like I said, it comes down to clean, drain, and dry.
It looks like we have another question from Zealy about what the sources of mercury are these days in Otter Creek. And yeah, you know, I am not all that familiar, honestly, with mercury and like where it would come from currently. I would assume maybe some of it's legacy, but I do know that we have a couple of experts here, including Ethan. Sorry, Ethan. Do you know much about mercury and where that would be coming from?
No, it's a great question. You know, and we used to have concern about atmospheric sources of mercury, and in particular where, you know, there were waste incinerators and things like that where we're downstream of the jet stream essentially, and where atmospheric deposition, you know, is a good source. It used to be that you know, we'd have more sources of mercury in the environment from dental amalgams and sort of the mercury bearing incandescent or the fluorescent, you know, tubes and, you know, things like that. It used to be more of a matter of waste disposal, but I think there's so much recycling that's happening now that's helping to address those sources of mercury in the environment. But it's mostly due to atmospheric deposition. I think we're starting to see an improvement on our conditions. As it relates to the especially with the fisheries communities and where mercury methylation happens from bioaccumulation. So the fish that are feeding on smaller fish that are feeding on bugs and sort of that bioaccumulation that happens in the environment that, due to less mercury being deposited, especially in our downstream reaches, that we're able to see less bioaccumulation. And, but I know that, certain species are more prone to that sort of methylation that happens. And like walleye, for instance, there's like a walleye management plan having to do with the walleye fishery and fish consumption advisories associated with that. So I'll stop there. There's probably other people here that know more about it than I do.
To clarify, Kate, when you make reference to legacy, you mean just the fact that once it's there, it doesn't go anywhere? That's what you mean by like a pre-existing?
Yeah, like maybe from fertilizer applied in the past, or like even if they've stopped applying, it's still there in the soil, and then that soil erodes and essentially legacy phosphorus, even if it's not still being added.
Gotcha.
Yeah. All right, well, if no other questions, then I guess we'll wrap up. Thank you all for coming tonight. It was a pleasure. And